Camille Rourke stepped off the bus into Drain's desert. Older, silver-haired, unassuming. Young soldiers scoffed. She ignored them, walking straight ahead. A faded ghost tattoo hinted at secrets. At the firing range,
this is a game, soldier?
Camille stood calm.
You think you can just
The drill
waltz in
sergeant
here and
yelled.
play with these
Young
weapons?
soldiers smirked. She precisely cleaned her rifle, ghost tattoo visible. Her gaze locked on target, unwavering. In the combat gym, Camille stood barefoot. 5 male opponents surrounded her. She dropped into a low stance, ghost tattoo prominent on her sweating arm.
Get up, let's go.
One man fell. She calmly watched the rest. Camille walked off the mat.
I appreciate your support, everyone.
In hand,
This was
serene.
tough, but we did
Behind
it.
her, young soldiers began to clap, a thunder of shame and awe. Her tattoo gleamed. The colonel watched silently. The steel door swung open to the blazing desert sun. Camille walked out alone. Her face was calm, strong, the ghost tattoo clear on her arm. She walked forward, leaving a silent legacy. The desert didn't care who you were. It didn't flinch at rank. It didn't blink at reputation. And neither did Fort Drain, a brutal crucible buried in heat and silence, known for turning elite soldiers into something even sharper. When Camille Rourke stepped off the transport bus, no one saluted. No one even paused. She was older than everyone else on the tarmac by at least 15 years. Her hair, tightly pulled back, shimmered with streaks of silver in the harsh sun. Her face bore the quiet lines of sleepless years in wind-carved places. To the young officers who watched from the shade of the mess hall, she looked like a file mix-up, a joke, a relic. They watched her carry her duffel bag with calm, unhurried steps, her spine straight, her eyes fixed on the admin building, as if the whispers around her were nothing more than wind-blown grit. "She's 42?" one whispered. "Must have bribed someone," another laughed. "A desk clerk looking for glory." Her file supported their assumption. 1 page. No combat citations, no high-clearance postings, just a completed basic training date, 20 years prior, and a transfer from logistics. To them, she was a mistake. To Colonel Mathias, she was a red flag. He held her paper-thin file in his hand like it might dissolve. "Rourke," he said as she stood at parade rest in front of his desk, "your record is lacking." Camille met his gaze. Her voice was low, neutral. "It is what it is, sir." "This program isn't orientation," he warned. "It's an elite intake pipeline. The washout rate is over 80% for 25-year-olds. "I understand. I'm here to meet the standard." The colonel sighed and stamped her orders with the weight of doubt. "See Sergeant Thorne. And Rourke, don't make yourself my problem." Sergeant Thorne wasn't built for compromise. He was a walking wall of bark commands, barrel-chested and fueled by scorn. To him, every recruit was raw meat, and Camille Rourke was freezer-burned. He spotted her the moment she entered the combat facility. "Well, well," he said loudly, letting the entire platoon hear. "Looks like they're letting Grandma cosplay G.I. Joe." The young soldiers laughed. Camille did not. She stood motionless, posture perfect, hands behind her back. "You got something to say, Rourke?" Thorne growled. "No, Sergeant." He hated the silence. It wasn't submission, it was control, and he couldn't stand it. "You'll be singing a different tune once you're puking up breakfast on my obstacle course." From that moment on, she became his favorite target. He found fault in everything. The angle of her boots, the tightness of her bun, the imaginary tremor in her trigger finger. Yet her groupings on the range? Surgical. Her rifle maintenance? Impeccable. Her PT scores? Consistent. She never broke records, but she never broke. Rourke didn't race. She paced. On the 5-mile runs, the younger men would sprint the first mile, sweat slick and full of bravado. By mile 3, they slowed. By mile 4, they fell behind. Camille never wavered, her breath steady, her stride unwavering. Private Calloway, one of the quiet ones, noticed. He saw how she moved like she had nothing to prove, and yet proved everything with every mile. He saw how she cleaned her weapon like it was an extension of her, how her eyes never stopped moving, scanning, absorbing, not with fear, but with readiness. But the officers, they still mocked. Lieutenant Rassan, young and jaw-chiseled, taunted her in the mess hall. Need help cutting that, Rourke? Might pull something in your shoulder. She didn't flinch. She just ate. Quiet, measured, unshaken. And that infuriated them. They were trained to provoke, and they couldn't land a single hit. What they saw as fragility was discipline. What they mistook for fear was focus. And what they failed to realize was that they weren't sharpening her. They were revealing her. The combatives module was Sergeant Thorne's kingdom, and in his kingdom, power meant dominance. Attack is everything, he roared to the assembled candidates. If you're defending, you're losing, and if you're hesitating, you're already dead. Thorne favored raw aggression. His style was kinetic, brutal, loud. He loved throwing bodies around the mat, loved the sound of impact, of pain, of submission. Camille Rourke didn't move like that. When they practiced joint locks and throws, she used angles and weight shifts, subtle torque, precise timing. While others muscled through resistance, she slipped past it. Her form was clean, controlled, and completely unacceptable to Thorne. "Rourke!" he barked after one throw. "What is that? You're dancing with him, not fighting." She reset, performed the same technique again, her voice calm. "Yes, Sergeant," he seethed. It wasn't defiance. It was incapacity. She simply could not move inefficiently. Her body operated under a different software, and Thorne hated code he couldn't crack. So he set a trap, the Reaper drill. Normally a 3-on-1 endurance gauntlet, Thorne changed the rules. "Today," he bellowed, "we separate the soldiers from the spectators." His eyes locked on Rourke. "Special scenario, 5-on-1. Gasps echoed. 5 was punishment. It wasn't a test. It was an execution. Lieutenant Rassan stepped forward, followed by Cole, Bennett, Davis, and Chun, the largest, fastest, cockiest officers in the group. Camille stepped barefoot into the mat in silence. From the observation deck above, Colonel Mathis crossed his arms. He had come to witness the inevitable, the collapse of the logistics mistake. Racine cracked his knuckles. "Don't worry, Grandma. We'll go easy." Camille didn't answer. She shifted into a low, balanced stance. Her arms hung loosely at her sides. Not coiled, settled, like stone. Thorne blew the whistle. Racine charged. A shoulder-first bull rush. Pure force. But Camille wasn't there. At the last second, she pivoted 6 inches to the left. Her hand jabbed a nerve cluster behind his jaw. Her foot tapped the back of his knee. Down he went, crumpling like a tower of cards. 1 second, one move, one man out. Cole and Bennett came next, opposite sides. Camille dropped low, seized Cole's wrist mid-punch, and spun, using him like a shield. Bennett slammed into his partner. They tangled. Camille stomped on Cole's knee, hard enough to end the fight, but not to cripple. 3 down. Gasps replaced whispers. Davis and Chun hesitated now. The bravado had bled from their eyes. They advanced slowly. Camille remained centered, utterly still. A mountain, not a soldier. Davis feinted high, dove low, classic wrestling. Her elbow came down sharp onto the back of his neck. Lights out, only Chun remained. He froze, hands up, his eyes scanning his fallen comrades. His chest rose in panic. He stepped back, another step. Camille didn't move. She watched, patient, measured. The moment stretched. Chun dropped his hands. "I'm done," he whispered. A single nod from her. It was over. Colonel Mathis had stopped breathing. He gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles blanched. Down below, even Thorne's voice had vanished. He had tried to humiliate her, tried to break her. Instead, she had rewritten the room. What they had just witnessed wasn't training. It was a display of mastery, of lethal geometry, of power in its quietest form. And Camille Rourke, whom they mocked, doubted, dismissed, stood untouched at the center of 5 broken egos. She hadn't just passed. She had redefined the standard. Silence held the gymnasium in a grip tighter than any chokehold. 5 of the most physically dominant men in the program lay scattered across the mat, some groaning, some stunned, one unconscious. And Camille Rourke hadn't even broken a sweat. Sergeant Thorne stood motionless, jaw slack. His entire teaching philosophy, aggression, intimidation, brute force, lay shattered in front of him. He had spent weeks barking at her to correct techniques she had already surpassed. He had tried to mold her, not realizing he was looking at the blacksmith. On the mat, Camille picked up her towel and water bottle with the same quiet precision she had entered with. She didn't bow, didn't grin, didn't so much as glance at the stunned crowd. She had come to meet the standard. Now it had to rise to meet her. From above, Colonel Mathis finally moved. He turned and descended the stairs slowly, 1,000 gears grinding in his mind. The file he had stamped weeks ago, thin, blank, misleading, was no error. It was camouflage, and he had fallen for it. By the time he reached the gym floor, the silence had fractured. It started with a single slow clap, Private Calloway, then another, and another, until the entire room, every candidate, every instructor, every skeptic rose to their feet, their hands coming together in a thunder of reluctant awe. They weren't applauding victory, they were apologizing. Camille didn't react. No nod, no bow, just a soft exhale, like closing a book she had already read. She turned toward the exit. That was when Mathis intercepted her. Rourke. His voice was rough, unsure. She paused. He searched her face, the creases, the steel, the quiet intensity. "Your file," he began, then stopped. What could he say? That he had misjudged her? That he had treated a legend like dead weight? "It doesn't do you justice." Camille's eyes met his. A flicker of something passed between them. Not triumph, not anger, just weariness. "It did its job, sir," she said quietly. Then she walked past him, out the steel doors, into the sun, and the gym, once again, was left in silence. This time not of scorn, but reverence. The doors closed behind her with a metallic thud. Camille Rourke didn't look back. She didn't need to see the faces of those who had once mocked her. She didn't need validation, or gratitude, or redemption. She hadn't stepped into that gym to prove anyone wrong. She had stepped in to prove that silence, when rooted in purpose, is louder than any scream. Inside, Sergeant Thorne stood in the center of the mat, staring at the empty space she had occupied. The weight of his failure pressed down on his shoulders, not because he had lost control of his class, but because he had never understood what real control looked like. Colonel Mathis remained by the exit, still trying to reconcile the ghost he had seen with the ghost she had always been. The program at Fort Drayen would continue. Candidates would cycle in, tests would be administered, standards would be debated. But something unspoken had changed. The young officers no longer laughed so easily. They adjusted their grips, held their stances longer, cleaned their rifles with care. They had seen what excellence looked like: unannounced, uncelebrated, and unstoppable. And somewhere out in the blinding desert sun, Camille Rourke kept walking. Not away, forward.